For the slight delay there. We had technical issues, imagine that. So I want to welcome you. Thank you for attending the 2014 PDS Tech Conference. I want to thank you also, as John Miller mentioned earlier today, for being partners with PDS, for being employees of PDS, for all of the things that you do to make PDS what it is. So I want to thank you for that. Most importantly, thanks for showing up for this session, because I had some bets with some of my coworkers that I really didn't want to pay out because I would be standing in here talking to myself. So, so thank you for showing up for this session. I appreciate it. So what we're going to talk about today is IT service measurement and customer experience strategies. I'm going to put more emphasis probably on the back part of that than I will on the front part of that, just because so much of what we do today is driven by ones and zeros and by numbers that we're really going to focus more so on the customer service and the customer experience. So survey question, how many of you are aligning to an operational framework? And if you don't know what that is, here's some examples. So ITIL, information technology. So can I see a show of hands? How many of you are leveraging one of these? All right, that's good. That's actually really good. Typically, the average is about 57% of organizations are leveraging this in some way, shape, or form, some capacity. Another question. If you are doing this, what is the focus of, what are the processes that you're focused on? So obviously, there's a number of processes. So how many of you are focused on incident management? Okay, all right. Change management. Yeah, those are usually the two big ones, right? Availability management, so, yeah, it starts to get a little, drops off after here. Service level management. That's good. That's an increase from what I was expecting to see. So capacity management, that's something that occasionally is done by the infrastructure team more so than by traditional service desk or operational entities. And obviously we get down into financial management. We typically don't think of that when we think of IT, but financial management is obviously a key component to the success of the IT organization. So with that, we'll talk about the financial model, right? I have the unique opportunity as working for PDS as a solutions provider or a service provider that we're focused a little bit differently than I think most of you are as a traditional IT organization, right? Traditional IT organizations are really focused more on that cost and that return on investment. How quickly can I get my money back on that? Now that's not to say that this isn't important to us as a service provider, but our tendency is to focus more on that price of the service, because the way that we view obviously our customers and our clients is as a consumer of that service. Now, a lot of you may be doing the same things as far as how you align yourself with your business organizations, but we'll talk more about that today as well. One measure of success that we focus on as that service provider, again, is some of that profitability. That helps us to gauge the success of our solutions, right? Because obviously there's a demand there. If the demand is being consumed by consumers such as yourself, that obviously is a key driver for us as to we've got the right mix of products. So, but I would also, like I say, I would also challenge you to think of that in your own ways, right? How many of you are advertising your services to your business organizations in some capacity? Show of hands. Okay. I'm assuming in more of a traditional service catalog kind of model. Okay. Well, that's one way that IT is changing from a traditional model of the business will come to us, they'll tell us what they want, we'll build it, and we'll move on from there. Instead, we're now starting to think about things differently as building those services and then taking those out to the business units to consume those. So again, services, and some of you may be focused more so on your costs. As an operations, as an IT organization, we have a tendency to focus a little bit more on the costs of what it is to deliver than it is that necessarily what the demand and the service pricing is. So that's something to think about as well. We need to start to think about, and one of the things that some of these measures will help us with, and why I focus so much on that financial management component, is that we need to start to run IT as a business versus how we've run it before. This makes us more self-sufficient, right? There's a lot of us, I'm sure, that are in a more traditional IT scenario where you're at the mercy of whatever the budget process is, and you get an allocation of funds based on your other core business, right? So let's try and align those things so that you can get more from the core business by providing value back to them in this type of a model. All right. I'm going to take you through 4 benefits of metrics. Like I say, the first part of this we're going to talk about metrics. The second part of this we'll talk more about that customer experience. So 4 benefits to metrics, right? Visibility to the effectiveness and the efficiency of IT services being delivered. Obviously that's a key one, right? We can work behind the curtain all day long. People don't always know or understand the things that we do as an IT organization to deliver those services out to the end user community. So this is one way of providing that visibility. Essentially what we need to do as an IT organization, and how we can use metrics and measures to do that, is to evangelize or to really promote ourselves in ways as far as showing those measures and what the value is back to the business unit. Another benefit of metrics: process-oriented, fact-based analysis, right? We're all engineers or some degree of that at heart if we're in the IT world. So we have a tendency to think very binary, very 1 or 0. This is where we really gravitate to metrics because it does enable us to very clearly disseminate whether that's been successful or not successful, or what degree of success. The other piece that this helps with is it also resolves, especially as you start to interact more with business units, is to understand how this resolves issues with finger pointing, right? Hey, you did this. Oh, well, that had this impact on my business, especially when you're talking about service delivery, right? That service delivery needs to be done in a consistent, high-quality way. So this is one of those areas where you can use that to very clearly and concisely show back to the business unit your value. Okay? 2, providing senior management with indicators to make timely and accurate decisions. Right? A lot of this data is very useful for making key business decisions. I know myself and my team use it on a regular basis to make sure that we're performing as we expected we would. It also gives us some nice insight into where we may be not performing as we would like, and how we can focus in and make some improvements in that area. Okay? So a little bit of a David Letterman here, but we'll go, drum roll please. Number 1 on the 4 benefits to metrics: mitigating operational risk. Right? Most of the time, what we care, those metrics are serving us a purpose. Right? They're serving the need for us to understand how are we avoiding risk and how are we providing a higher level of service and quality back to the business units. Okay? So it obviously helps us avoid dissatisfied customers. Nobody likes that. It's always a tough situation to have a conversation where somebody's not been satisfied with what you're providing. Unwanted public relations. You know, Dr. Canton this morning made some references to social media and some of the power of social media and all of those, how fast information spreads. This is one of those areas where that's a key factor, right? If we can stay on top of and use those metrics to mitigate operational risk, it also limits our exposure to bad publicity, right? Legal exposure, obviously we're all under a lot of scrutiny as the days go on with government regulation and compliance and things like that, so those are key elements. Loss of revenue, another one of those major pieces. How many, seems like just about every other day you're reading in the newspaper some kind of a security breach, or you're getting some piece of mail that says this company or that company has had a security issue and that you need to take corrective measures. Obviously that's something that understanding the metrics of your availability and of your service helps avoid. Fines and penalties, a number of things. Unplanned service outages. This is probably one of the biggest ones, is understanding that your availability and the availability of the services that you provide really helps to address unplanned outages. So the more that you can design your environment to address that and have metrics that show the availability, it's a lot easier to take the mysticism out of IT. IT has a tendency to be a little bit of smoke and mirrors, right? How many of us have stood in front of a business leader and tried to explain the inner workings of an IT system, and they give you the glazed over look? Wasted time from rework. This is another one that I know that we try and understand better each day, is how much time are we losing through rework and through situations where there's significant impact to service delivery and the time associated with rectifying that. Okay? It can have a toll on morale as well, and unexpected costs. Why is there resistance to metrics? We all see the value in metrics, but there's also a stigma that goes with metrics. We have other priorities. How many have other things to do than make metrics and charts and other things? I know people on my team would say, yes, I do. We're uncomfortable with sharing performance. A lot of times, it's a little bit of the ostrich element, right? If you don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist, right? So this is one of those areas where people are resistant to metrics, but you have to be honest with yourself if you're going to use metrics and use metrics the right way. It really helps in sharing that information and taking a lot of the interpretation out of that. Now there is the old saying, right? Statisticians don't lie, or excuse me, stats don't lie, but statisticians do. So there is an element of that any statistic or metric can be used for good or evil, I guess. But it's one of those things that is very helpful as an organization but has resistance to it. Don't have the tools that you need to accurately measure things. This is something that we'll talk a little bit more about, but a lot of times people will fixate on the tool set and that the tool set will solve it all, that all of the information that is in the tool set is valuable information, right? What I would say is start simple here. This is an area where don't go for an expensive tool. Use spreadsheets if you have to. Use a whiteboard and start making some marks on a whiteboard. Just keep it as simple as you can, because the more complex you make it, it starts to be less helpful to you in a very targeted way. That's why I say start simple and work into that level of detail as you understand what you're looking for and what that measure should be. It's a lot of work to measure that level of detail. And a lot of people say, I don't have time for that, right? That first one. I have other priorities, I've got other things to do, I don't have the time to sink into that. But they don't understand is what time are they losing, or what time I should say could they gain from collecting that information and using that to help make them more efficient and more effective. Okay? Nobody's interested in the information. How many of us have produced a report? Here you go, hand it off to the requester, and or you distribute a more generalized report. This is one that's fairly common. You'll produce a generalized report, send it out to a group of people. Yeah, they kind of look at it, but for the most part, they're good. That's another thing that we'll really talk about later as we talk about more of that customer experience, is making that relevant. I'm going to endorse a book. I don't get any royalties or any spiffs for endorsing this book, but I would highly recommend it. If I don't know what your expectations were today around this session, but this book is very helpful in a more tactical manner. If you're looking for ways to calculate some of these metrics, I would highly recommend it. And as you can see, it's a fairly small book, pretty simple read, but it does a nice job. Randy does a really great job of laying out some of those metrics and those calculations that can help to assist you in how to attack that. And again, I'd emphasize start simple and work up from there. So highly recommend it. So these are some of the elements that are talked about, particularly that Randy covers in a nice way and provides you with some really good what-if scenarios, as well as how to define those critical success factors that'll lead into those key performance indicators. Okay? So that is the metric side. Now we're going to flip into another element that I think is just as important. I really view this as I mentioned here, two sides of the customer experience, or two sides of the same coin. You need to have metrics. They're important because they're tactical and they help give you some good feedback around what you're doing and what you're delivering. But there's another component to that a lot of us forget about. As engineers, as more technology-oriented people, we forget about that other piece, which is the relationship piece. And that's why I emphasize that relationship piece is more strategic, right? It's easier for us to sit back, work on a system, develop a really complex system and understand that and know it really well and measure it and capture tactical content from that system. It's a little bit more difficult for some of us to go out and build those relationships and be strategic and think in advance. So it's one of the things we're going to talk about. You really can't have one without the other, right? Whether you're very formal in how you go about distributing those metrics and engaging your consumers as it relates to the metrics, or if you're less formal and it's a simple hallway conversation. Hey, we had a great month this month. We hit this goal, right? It doesn't, again, start simple and work into something that's a little bit more complex, and so that both you can get more comfortable with it, as well as the people that you're providing the information to. Okay? Focus on relationships, then measure. You know, this is one of those things that I really like to emphasize, because if you are focused on the relationship and you learn what your business units need, it's a lot easier than to define what those metrics are and those measures are. Because now you have the ability to go back and say, oh, I know that when I talked to Bob in accounting, that he doesn't care about how quickly I process this request as much as he cares that I do it from Monday through Friday from these hours to these hours, right? Understand that business. Really, we kind of learned some things. I don't know how many of you recall the first Gulf War. That was kind of a unique situation in the sense that it was a different angle we'd always had war correspondents and journalists that were involved with military operations, but they weren't as embedded as what they were in the first Gulf War. That was all because of the relationship, and we got a lot more information, and it helped us with measures as a direct result of that. So I really would emphasize that focus on relationship. All right. Based on our earlier survey questions, if you've implemented one of those processes, change management, incident management, have you seen a positive change in the delivery of services? So you put these processes in place, you captured a lot of information, you did a lot of analysis. Did it tell you anything? Well, it's interesting because this survey came back and it, as you can see on the first bullet point, 42% improved management of IT-related risk. If you remember from those top 4 that we talked about, right? Number 1 was mitigating risk. So that one's a pretty straightforward one. That's pretty easy. Lower IT costs. We talked about that with the financial model component and trying to understand your costs. What's surprising to me is that 40% said that those processes and that service delivery improved communications and relationships between business and IT. Does that surprise anybody? It does me, because I've worked in the IT industry for 20 years. And communication between IT and the business has always, in my experience, has always been something that needed improvement and needed work. So this is encouraging to see, and I hope that you are experiencing that same thing. All right, what do people want out of a service? Again, Dr. Canton mentioned this a little bit this morning, but that consumerization, right? We go out today and we don't buy technology from traditional channels. We've gone to the consumerization of technology has made a lot more computing power, a lot more readily available to people, a lot more quickly. I have four boys, and all of them are running around with some form of technology on a regular basis. So I see the consumerization of technology happening on a daily basis. So what do people want out of it? They want to be able to provide value in their work life. You know, a lot of the keynotes that we saw this morning focused on that, the simplicity. The Intel keynote, if you saw them comparing the two different people doing the exact same thing in much more efficient ways on one side than the other. Ease of use. Right? A lot of us struggle with, or there's a group of people that use technology that are focused on that ease of use. Right? That's going to be key for everything to be accepted and adapted quicker, is that ease of use. Dependability, obviously a key component of that. That's what people want. I want to flip the switch on the wall and I want the electricity to turn on, right? That's that utility component. We need to do that. Consistent performance, again, that quality piece. It has to be dependable, but I also would equate consistent performance to quality because you can have, we talked about this a little bit this morning as well, that you can have the cheapest laptop or tablet or device out there, but if you have to reboot it every few days or hours, it's not consistently performing for you, and that quality is going to hinder you. But it also has to be at a fair price. So those are obviously all components that need to be taken into consideration as you're building out a service. What's the key to an exceptional customer experience? You know, business relationship management is an element of ITIL. So I don't know how deep you've gotten into the ITIL books that are not small by any measure. But one of the things that's starting to gain more and more momentum in the industry and in general acceptance is the concept of a business relationship manager. You know, someone who is there, understands the inner workings of IT, but is, again, kind of coming back to that journalism example. They're going out and they're getting embedded into the accounting department, the marketing department. This cloistered group of IT folks is starting to change. That dynamic's starting to change. And if you are in that situation where you're in a more traditional IT role, I would challenge you and ask you to challenge your organization to step outside of that and start to ask some questions. Go spend some time with various other departments to understand really what matters to them and how do you take that back to the way that you're doing things from an IT service delivery perspective. Okay? The BRM is both a process as well as a role within ITIL v3. And I have been focused in the last few years as more so with the role, but there's also a significant amount of the process that needs to go around with that. So just to give you a little bit of background on myself. So I've worked for a number of different organizations over my 20 years in IT. One of them was with a managed services provider in the Madison area. Some of you may know Burby. It's kind of a Madison favorite in town, but that was one of the managed services providers I worked for a little while. I got an opportunity to understand what is a service provider, understand more about this relationship component. As part of that, I then felt like boy, I really have an understanding of what I need to know from my business units, but I want to get into the infrastructure side. So I went on to become an infrastructure manager for a company in Minneapolis for about 4 or 5 years, and really get a true appreciation for the operations side of the house. But that being said, it was for a individual IT shop, and I missed what a managed service provider had to offer as far as the variety and the diversity. So I came back to managed services. And I'll tell you that was really helpful for me to develop and understand those interactions on a much different level. So that's a key component, and that's why I say that it's important for us as IT people to make our way out of traditional IT and move into the other areas of the business so that we can understand their business needs in particular. So identify the need and ensure that they can be met. This comes back a little bit to those measures. You know, obviously, first and foremost, that's why I say put that relationship first. Get out there, understand what's going on, what are their business needs. Once you have that understanding, you can go back and start to measure and do those measures based on what you're trying to deliver and what their real needs are, and align those so that you're capturing the right measures, not just measures for the sake of measures. These are some very academic descriptions of the objectives of a business relationship manager or that process. But one of the things that I wanted to cover on is meeting with that business unit is an important piece. And again, get out of IT while you can to some degree, right? Get out into the business units, understand what their needs are, bring that back. Capture and articulate business requirements. There has to be a continuous feedback loop. Some of you, again, that are more familiar with ITIL, there's an element in ITIL v3 that's focused on continuous service improvement, CSI, right? How many of you are using CSI in some way, shape, or form? Anyone? Got a couple people. Okay, good. Good. I will tell you that this business relationship manager function is another really helpful way to do that. Right? It's a great way to, another military analogy to some degree is think of it as a reconnaissance. Right? You're going to send someone out from the IT organization. They're going to go meet with the business units, understand the details, bring those details then back to the command that's running the mission, and align that then with what you need to do. Okay? Be able to prioritize services and resources or assets appropriately. So think of this role. I talk to my team on this frequently. Think of this role as an ambassador, right? Somewhat of a United Nations. I've also referred to the role as a referee in some scenarios. But the purpose of this role is to go out and to help do that translation. But the nice part about this is that you're getting something in return. You get an opportunity to understand the business, but you also get an opportunity to go out and help the business understand the IT value. So that's a key component for establishing and maintaining those constructive relationships and articulating those business requirements. So establishing formal complaints and escalation processes, again, most of us that are familiar with ITIL and are using incident management, problem management, and some of those pieces, those are in there. The premise of the BRM is to just help with the funnel of that information, right? So instead of the entire business having the business units coming back individually to, say, a service desk, you still want to have them funnel those requests through a service desk, but there's someone who's maybe assigned to, say, the accounting department and working with all of the tickets that are in the queue that are associated to the accounting department, trying to look for trends and take those back to their stakeholders back in the accounting or finance area. That's a nice way to establish that channel and get that open dialogue going. It also helps provide for those escalations. If something isn't going well that they need, or if it's not meeting their needs, they've got a nice way to get in touch with somebody and make that connection and help move that forward. Okay? Mitigate cases in which there are conflicting or competing requirements. How many of us have way too many things and not enough hours to do it? I know I do, yeah. So this is another way of doing that. If you've got that BRM or that liaison that's out at the business units, they can come back and understand what are those, of those 20 things that are in the queue for them, which one of those are number 1 or number 2. So, all right. Here's a little bit of strategy on how to develop the BRM or that business relationship manager function or role. Free flow of information. This is essential. You know, again, Dr. Canton did a nice job this morning talking about that, and we all see it in our lives outside of work. Social engineering is, or excuse me, social engineering. Social media is really driving the expanse of information. So make the information readily accessible. That's a key for them understanding what's available to them and how you're helping them. That can be done through dashboards, portals, reports. And again, starting simple. Start simple with maybe a simple report that you publish on a regular basis to help them understand the value. Regular communications. This can be done in a number of ways. So you see I've got notifications on there. This again is a great place to start, and you'll start to see momentum very quickly. You'll see something as simple as an email notification can go out, and the next thing you're doing Twitter feeds and other things that help provide more real-time updates to your stakeholders. It's a great way to get things started. Again, on that regular communication, monthly service reviews. I work with a number of clients, and a lot of times we're okay. We don't need to meet every month or even every quarter. We'll meet a couple times a year. One of the things that I would strongly encourage is push that envelope a little bit. Tell them, say, you know what, why don't you hang in there with me and let's do a proof of concept. Let's do this every month for 3 months. At the end of that quarter, if you aren't seeing value out of these conversations, I'll concede and we'll pull back and we'll go back to a quarterly schedule or something that fits your needs more. But as part of those regular communications, that's how you're going to understand what their real needs are. And that's how you're going to understand where your value is to them. So, documented recommendations, another great spot. So with all of this intelligence that you're collecting, all of this experience that you're gaining from the business, but then you also need to be bringing something back to them. You're making observations about how things run on the backside. That's, again, where those metrics come in. But if you don't deliver that out to them in some kind of a recommendation that says, hey, you know what? Here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that on the 3rd week of the month, there is a spike in activity around password resets. And so what's going on the 3rd week of the month for you that we would experience these passwords resets? They could, oh, well, you know what? We have an influx of people that don't use this system any other time other than the 3rd week of the month. They're finishing up financials, or they're putting in some service requests for materials. Oh, well, great. Well, why don't we have some kind of a campaign or an opportunity to do something with them prior to that so we can head that off? Is there a self-service solution that we can implement that would help avoid that so that people aren't having to call in? All of those kinds of things. Transparency. That definitely matters to customers. Right? You can do all the things that you really want to do to deliver those services, and if they don't have a clear understanding and you're not transparent with them, both on your successes but also on your struggles, you're not going to establish that trust. You're not going to build that trust that you need to in order to effectively improve that relationship. So, You don't, this is another component too. But what I'm saying here with this transparency piece is give them the information that's relevant to them. You don't have to flood them with a lot of information, right? We have a tendency to have a lot of details, and they may not, at the end of the day, really care about all of those details. But if you tailor, again, if you know your audience and you know how to tailor that message to them, that's really helpful. It's really helpful because then you can get that information out there. They understand that you've actively listened to them and that you're applying that knowledge and that experience. Okay? Building trust. And this comes again back into that element of listen to the voice of the customer. This business relationship manager role is kind of in a unique position. When you are within your IT organization, you are really the face of the customer. You're advocating for the stakeholders that you represent. When you are out working with the business on a given issue or a given solution, you're advocating on behalf of your IT organization, right? So there is an interesting balance or paradox there with how this role works. Bring relevant ideas and be part of the solution. That's another key role to this liaison. You have to be able to bring solutions, again, that are relevant to what their needs are and how you can solve or help their situation. If you can have all kinds of good suggestions, but if they're not something that's readily applicable, then it's not going to benefit them. Be present and be engaged. I know this seems like kind of a no-brainer, but again, like I said, we have a tendency as more engineer-minded people to say, I've got this thing I want to work on, I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to send it out to an email. I would encourage you to take the time, get in front of that person, get a meeting with that person, take them through the information, and really be engaged and present with them instead of behind a screen sending emails. Okay? Respect the customer's role, right? The customer's always right. Maybe. You have to respect that the business unit or the customer in that scenario, they know their business, and they're the experts there. So let them help you understand their business, no different than you're going to help them understand your business of IT. And this is where, again, it comes back into there's going to be some compromise as you work through those discussions and developing that trust and relationship. Demonstrate commitment, doing your part or more, and taking action without being asked. You know, if you went to one of your business units and you knew that they were looking for something or had some needs, and you went and did something and created a report, or you provided them with a capability that they wanted, that they've been meaning to talk to you about, but you knew about it because you'd heard conversations and kind of were embedded with that department to understand the value of that, and you were able to deliver that to them before they even asked for it. Wow, would that ever be powerful, right? That's the kinds of things that this business relationship management really focuses on. How do you know you're successful? One thing that, you know, there's surveys galore out there, right? I don't know about you guys, but whenever I do something and I have a survey that's afterwards, I kind of cringe. Oh, how long is this? What amount of time am I going to lose from my life that I'm not going to get back, right? This is a great way to measure your success, but do it, again, very simply. If you're not familiar with the concept of a net promoter score, I would encourage you to do some research and understand what that is. There's a lot of different ways to calculate it and to capture that information, again, coming back to that metrics piece. But at the end of the day, the net promoter score is a very simple measure. Do you like us? Do you not like us? Right? That's for all of us that work in the world of binary and ones and zeros, That's about as 1 and 0 as it gets, right? So that's a great one to use. And again, don't overcomplicate that survey component. Just understand, am I meeting your needs or am I not? And if I'm not, help me understand how I can improve on that. And in closing, I know I'm a little ahead of time here, but I did want to emphasize, PDS has the luxury, and I have the opportunity every day to work with a great, diverse group of clients in a lot of different ways. And I very much appreciate that. I know that for you as IT organizations, you maybe don't have that diversity. Leverage us and our experience in doing that so that we can help you. And I emphasize this extension of our customers' organizations. We don't view ourselves as a separate entity, especially members of my team are focused on how we can be an extension to help empower you as a client to do what you need to do and what your business needs to do. Along those lines, this is kind of our promise as PDS to you as a client. And again, this is another one of those concepts that I would encourage you to use. Have some kind of a statement that you're making to your business units to say, hey, this is our commitment. So our promise to you as a strategic partner is to help leverage capabilities with technology for increasing agility, speed, and efficiency, right? So all things that kind of tie in nicely to our theme this year at the conference of accelerating together. And so with that, I've kind of covered my materials. Is there questions that I can help answer on anything that I've shared with you today? There's got to be some out there, no? Was this helpful? I'm gonna use some of my own methods. Was any of this information helpful? I hope so. Yes? Okay. What was something that you already knew that didn't help you as much? Right. That's a little bit of Captain Obvious. Yes, yes. I put it out there just because there's a lot of people that don't think about that. Right. We get so committed to being heads down that we're always thinking about, okay, what's the next thing I have to do, instead of taking that few minutes to go out and say, you know what, I did this really cool thing and I want to share it with these people and make sure that they feel the same way about it. So. All right. Other questions? Observations? Okay. With that, I will give you some time back to prepare for your next session. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.